So let's talk about unlocking your DNA. Imagine a world where we could know the secret code of optimal health, where we could maximize our potential and increase the quality of life by knowing exactly what to eat or what not to eat, how to exercise, and even what supplements to take. In this world, we could minimize healthcare expenditures by so much and spend our money on what we truly need and what we truly want. The concept of not knowing what to do is eliminated if we know our blueprint. So the concept of not knowing what to do can make life a challenge. So with DNA, we're going to teach you how this blueprint can give you the right information to choose how to be in optimal health. It'll give you a blueprint so that you know what to do. We are now living in a cutting-edge world, living on an edge where we can do precision-based medicine. We use DNA to help you unlock the codes of how to be completely and totally well.
So tonight we're excited because the DNA actually empowers you. How many like to be empowered? See, I don't want to be reactionary. I'd rather be living in a life we call a prehabilitative state. So the DNA is going to empower us to give us the unique protocol for us to take control of our health, which I think everybody would agree is a big deal these days. Predictably increase the chances you will not develop diseases. How many think that's a cool idea? And lastly, optimize our health in all aspects as well as body composition. We did not talk about weight loss, we talked about body composition. A very important difference right there.
So understanding genetics, not just, what are your genes? They're not just your blue genes, but the genes that are at the very core of every cell in your body. A gene is a short segment of DNA, and it contains instructions for how, when, and what type of proteins your body actually makes. So all of the instructions that your body uses to tell itself what to do and how to do it comes from your genes. And the genes, they're comprised of multiple letters like A, adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And these letters go together in what's called a base pair. It's kind of like an alphabet soup. These letters have to fit together just right. If they're not just right, they have a dysfunction. And knowing if there is a dysfunction there gives us kind of the power to know how to eliminate or moderate chronic sickness and disease. So the alphabet, if you will, it determines how genes make things and how genes communicate. We all understand how words can be used in a language. Take the word lead, for example, or the word deal. Backwards, forwards, same letters, different explanation, same language, but different definition. Yet it's the same for DNA. If one A gets mixed up and becomes a T, it's going to be a different language or a different statement for how that gene expresses its proteins. So genes, they combine these letters in various ways, and they make words that specify proteins or amino acids that are necessary to make and create function that are encoded on your genes.
Now, what I find amazing is that we're 99.9% alike. So I want you to look at your neighbor and say, hey, we're more alike than you think. We all look different, we all think we're different, but we're all genetically 99.9% alike, which makes me think, wow, as I look around. But that 0.1% is amazing. As we all know, we're totally different at the same time. So we're more alike than we think, but we're more different than we think. Kind of a contrary type of statement. But back to is what Dr. Michele was saying. Everything matters in the way we word letters. Can you imagine, men, if you were going to say to your wife, I love your hat, but you inadvertently substituted the letter H with the letter F. And instead you said, I love your... Is she going to respond differently? Of course she is. It's all about communication. The way we say things produces and elicits some kind of response. Well, the body does the same thing. If we have one of these letters messed up, which are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs as they're known, one letter messed up, out of order, out of the normal construction of its normal cadence, it's going to communicate some other meaning. So what Dr. Michele was saying earlier, 4 letters are taken to form a protein. The protein forms a function, but if the 4 letters are different letters than they're supposed to be, can we all see that the protein and therefore the function may be a little bit off in one way or another? The difference is super important when we're talking about different enzymatic functions in the body, which are coded by our genes. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so when we talk about this, Dr. Michele, I want you to dive into kind of the division and what are gene polymorphisms.
So the variant that you hold is known as an allele. Remember I was talking about those letters, A to T and G to C, or let's say C to C and C to G. If you get 2 C's, that's called a wild type. It means, most often a wild type means normal function. If you take and you get the genetic polymorphisms, let's say you get 1 C from your mom and then you get a G from your dad, you're going to have a different functions. That's called a heterozygote. If you get a G from your mom and a G from your dad, now you have a homozygote, and that's a completely different function. So knowing genetics allows us to see what kind of polymorphisms you have to know if your genetic material is strongly or mildly or affected, not at all affected, that there's no association.
Now, one thing to add to that we think is very important, if something is not acting according to the normal function from the population group, does that necessarily mean it's a bad thing? No, it could be functioning better than the norm. It also could be functioning worse than the norm. So it's important to get things where they are contextually. So just because something is a heterozygous or a homozygote combination does not mean that's a bad thing. It could be really, really good. Make sense? Okay, good.
So the components of the DNA analysis, the ones that we specifically test for, are ones that are related to nutrition and ones that are related to exercise. And did you know that fitness is 80% nutrition? How many knew that? Fitness is 80% nutrition. If you don't feed it, it's not going to recover, and then you can't show up with any kind of power the next day. It's 80% nutrition and 20% exercise. So this is a giant area, and we all know that nutrition plans, what might work for one person may not work for another. You know, the ratio can be very, very off for different people. Poor nutrition will always wreak havoc on a system. So performance nutrition is defined as what works best for you, specifically for you, to provide the best potential outcome that's going to optimize your health when we put in combination nutrition and proper exercise and rest and life management. So they all have to go together. So DNA is going to help us master the perfect balance for you. The SNPs that we extract are related to nutrition and exercise. And we're going to begin first by talking about exercise and then about nutrition. So as we dive into this report, we're not going to be discussing individual SNPs because there are 51 pages that are involved in this report.
Unless you guys want to stay here until tomorrow night at this time, then we'll go with that.
So we're going to give you a broad-based stroke, kind of like with a paintbrush, and give you a general overall understanding and relevancy and the value of why you might want to have your DNA evaluated.
So we've all experienced this scenario. Someone gets a new workout plan, and we decide to join them, and they get great results, and we get terrible results. Anybody experience that? It's really typical because people respond unequally to the same plan. This is why one plan does not fit everybody. We've seen that cause problems in relationships and friendships before. I know you're cheating, you're doing something else. You can see the pattern going on. It can lead to great frustration. How many have been frustrated with that type of situation before? Very, very common with workouts as well as nutritional or diet plans. It's super important to understand the code of who you are. It gives you proper exercise, etc. How much rest period do you need? Understand that some people need to rest more than other people do. The old adage of high intensity all the time every day does not and I repeat, does not work for everyone. It can actually be catastrophic or even catabolic, destroying muscle tissue for some people. So we want to understand the best pattern of fitness for each of us. That's important to do. When we get this nailed down, I think we'd all agree that it allows us to not waste time while going to workout. I don't know about you, but I want to have my workout time optimized. I don't want it too long, and I don't want it too short. I want it just right. DNA helps us determine that. So this is why we're passionate about this. It changed our lives. We'll tell you our story in just a moment.
So, and it really gets rid of the conflict or the conflict of interest or a belief system. You know, pseudoscience is everywhere. Someone is trying this diet or someone is doing that diet, or there are so many different diets, but not one size fits all. What DNA is it's really science. It really begins to yield us the answer of precision for you and your long-term wellness. In terms of exercise, some people may need to slow down. Their recovery time is longer. They need a longer amount of time between exercise days than somebody else. They may carry more inflammatory markers just as a baseline. So it can really help to know if boot camp is the right thing for you, or if you're one that needs to slow down and do a fast walking pace or interval training. So the concrete data can help you form a proper exercise protocol so that you spend less time injured, more time recovered, and a lot of time doing exactly what you want to do, and less time in the gym spinning around thinking that more is actually better. So DNA analysis is almost necessary.
I think it's really necessary. I don't even think almost. I think it is, because certainly, you know, we've seen it time and time again where this scenario occurs. People can become fat loss resistant. Anybody heard of that before? It's so common that we spend many, many hours unraveling that because people inevitably think that more is better. Now, we're exercise people, as you probably have guessed. However, I would tell you that many times exercise is overvalued. As Dr. Michele said earlier, it's about 85% nutrition, what you put in your mouth, which represents the fuel to help you exercise anyway. So understand that we have seen people before work out too hard, not eat right, become fat loss resistant, where fat tissue starts going up and muscle tissue starts going down. And to give you an example, when we first did our genetics several years back, we got into it kind of before it was cool, you know, as they say, before country was cool. We did it, and we really used to spend a couple of hours in the gym. It was routine for us. We would do a lot of cardiovascular stuff, a lot of lifting. We honestly would spend an hour and 15 minutes lifting weights. Now, we were really tired, felt like we got a good workout. You know, we were sore, and that tended to be the judge for us whether we had a constructive time or not. How sore was I the next day? Man, were we wrong. When we got our genes back, it suggested that we cut this thing back severely. Like, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, because I was afraid, quite honestly, that I would start putting on fat tissue. How many have had that fear before, when you fear change? Well, we changed it, and it didn't take us long to understand that this was more efficient. It was better. Our fat loss went down and our muscle tissue went up, which is body composition optimization, which we all really, really want. Now, in this process, it cut down our weight training time from probably from an hour and 15 minutes or so to about 30, 35 minutes. That's it, which was pretty darn cool. I thought that was neat. We cut down our exercise from a cardiovascular standpoint, from having to go hard all the time. A lot of times we could just kind of do interval training, cut it shorter, and sometimes we could do long walks. You have something you want to add to that?
Well, that's perfect.
Thank you. I love it when she says, I'm perfect like that.
Well, and it really is true. We went from exercising 2 hours a day, or thinking that we had to do 2 a days. And you have to do 2 a days to keep your metabolism up, to keep your body at burning fat in the fat burning state. And we found much the contrary. In fact, we're into the gym and out of the gym between 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, and we're done 4 to 5 days a week.
I don't know about you, but I want to save some time. And I want to make sure my time is spent wisely. We get 1,440 minutes a day to utilize. Everybody know that? And some of you right now getting your calculators up and making sure I'm right. Even with daylight savings time, we're still right. Still 1,440 minutes. We need to use those things wisely. We need to exercise. How many agree with that? All of us, as long as we're alive, we need to be moving. No excuses. Excuses are like the backside of a pig. The closer you get, the more it stinks. Good answer.
One more time.
The excuses are like the backside of a pig. The closer we get, the more it
Stinks.
There you go. Thank you for joining us on that analogy. So there's generally a genetically derived percentage on how much time or how much percentage you should spend doing steady state cardio, endurance type of things versus sort of explosive power movements with weights per se. Can be further broken down in your genetics to aerobic and anaerobic. There's a general rule that we use to try to break this down because there's something called the anaerobic threshold. Generally speaking, it is 180 minus your age. Now
Everybody
what
get
that
that?
means, 180 minus your age is a general anaerobic threshold breakdown. That's the heart rate that above that, you're going to generally be in the anaerobic, meaning without oxygen range. Below that, you're going to be generally being in the aerobic, meaning the with oxygen range. What's the difference? Well, typically it takes oxygen, aerobic, to break down fat tissue. Pretty important, right? If you're in the anaerobic mode, you're typically using glucose to drive fuel sources. So we're typically going to be in a non-aerobic, meaning we're going to be burning fat in the aerobic zone, and we're not going to be burning fat specifically in the anaerobic zone. Very important to understand. Obviously, this information we derive from your genetics is blended into our holistic lifestyle plan. So you want to have a life plan, and this is what we give you with this. Now, we all sort of have to learn how hard to push and how much to step back. How many have ever heard this saying or this admonition when you're in the gym? Push! You heard that before? See, sometimes we can push too hard. Sometimes we all need to be pushed a little bit harder. I don't know about you, but I really want to maximize my potential, not just physically and not just with my muscles, but I want to maximize my potential in life. And it takes information to do that. It takes motivation to do that. And sometimes it takes somebody to get behind us and just kick us in the backside and say, do it. A lot of times genetics give us all the tools we need to do that. And basically our abilities are pushed. They're challenged. They're put in a place where we can actually grow. And we want to grow when we talk about genetics. It gives us our full potential in all areas. Isn't it a good idea to know your genetic potential? We think that's cool. If we know that and we've got that going, we can set that bar up here and go get it, as opposed to down here because this is where we think we're supposed to go. It's better to know we're supposed to go. I had many a parent come in and go through this process, and they had their children, and they said these things to me before. They said, man, I wish I had known this information when I was this age. I had a gentleman on the line today from Alaska. He was going over this analysis with himself and his 14-year-old son. His 14-year-old son's an incredible athlete. And he said to me, he said, if I'd only known this when I was his age, I would have been a better athlete than him. Talking about his boy. So I got a good laugh out of that. So the bottom line is, this information needs to come out in all of us. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to waste my time in the gym. I don't want to waste my time in life. And I want to maximize my potential in every single area. You guys with us on that? Good.
So recovery and rest. This is an interesting area. Harder is not always better. Genetically, we all have different recovery capacity. Some people can recover quickly and do 2-a-days. It's okay if they show up in the gym twice a day. Their body's ability to recover and repair and regenerate has that high capacity. Others of us, we need a little bit of time in between our exercise protocols. We need a little bit more stretching. We need vitamin R. 80% of fitness is nutrition. The other part of fitness is not just being in the gym breaking it down. We've got to have optimal recovery and rest so that those muscles can repair. So rest is mandatory. It's just mandatory for recovery. Without rest, we can't build muscles. How is a muscle built?
Well, muscles are built this way. We have to break them down with a load. Think about a load. If and I know you guys can probably see this online. If this clicker was a weight in my hand and my bicep muscles attached by a tendon to my lower arm bone, muscles pull, they don't push. Okay, so the lower bone is being pulled up by the shortening of the bicep muscle, this being the resistance. Over time, the body's going to get used to that force, correct? It's going to become normal. But at that point in time, I have to increase the resistance. So I might add 2 clickers in my hand, make it really heavy, right? And so I begin to do it. That added load causes breakdown, in this case, on the biceps muscles. The bicep muscles are broken down and they have to learn to repair. Well, the body's pretty smart. It doesn't want to get broke down again, so it rebuilds the muscle tissue with the proper vitamin R, rest, and the proper fuel, which is food, and time. They build up again and it will compensate, not just for the breakdown, but guess what? For those 2 clicker load, so next time it won't break down. So the muscle is broken down, rebuilt, and grows bigger than last time. That's why resistance training is super important. And you have to always practice it in a progressive manner, meaning you got to challenge the muscles. If you do the same thing all the time, you will stop growing. Right? Catch that, right? Good. Now, when we talk about recovery nutrition, we get asked all the time, well, what do I need to do to sort of, take as far as supplementations go? What is that? Well, they need to be targeted and specific. Just because something's out there that says this supplement will do that, don't believe the hype. The bottom line is there is no rules, no regulations out there. As long as you say, or you don't say, this particular supplement cures, treats, or somehow a specific disease, as long as you don't say that, anything's fair game. Did you know that? Even the testimonials don't have to be real. They could all be made up. It's still okay and it's still lawful to even lie, as long as it fits the rules. It's not fair, I know, but some of the marketing and some of the supplements are broad-reaching in their claims. And they're designed to sell things. This supplement does this supplement does that. It is completely overwhelming and confusing. How many have been inundated with that before? Like, what do I buy? What do I use? See, without clear direction, we're lost. Genetics tell us a story. Give you one example. Did you know you can take too many antioxidants? Did anyone know that? Because, my goodness, when we create energy, ATP production in our body through the mitochondria, that means we're creating free radicals. So, of course, if we have free radicals that are going to oxidize nearby cells, we need to take antioxidants to knock that stuff off. But here's the problem. The body has internal antioxidants. If we take in so much stuff on the outside, it will shut down or slow the body's own ability. That wouldn't be a good thing, because antioxidants coming in from the outside can only take on one free radical at a time. It's mono e mono. That's it. But the internal free radical quenchers, or our own internal fire department, can kill 10,000 to 100,000 per second internally. Which one needs to be focused upon? Internal. So that's just one example. Some people have good internal function. They don't need extra antioxidants. Why would you want to kill off a good thing? Make sense? Yeah, very interesting. Now, we've seen many folks improve, big time, with post-exercise nutrition. We many times will specifically put on some collagen protein, perhaps, if people's collagen receptors are a little bit slower to function. We need collagen to rebuild. We sometimes put on some antioxidants, depending on the person's exercise style or what they're currently doing. There are other nutrients, but bottom line is when you master this area, you can actually master something that I like to call muscle retention. And I don't know about you, but the more muscle you can hang on to in your life is a good thing, because as we age, we're naturally losing muscle tissue by the year at about 0.5 pound per year from 25 years of age forward. Now, if we don't do anything to fix that, I realize we're all on a natural decline. But if we're not slowing the natural decline, by the time we get to be 70 or 80, guess what? The risk of falling and the risk of frailty does what? Goes up. Hang on to as much muscle tissue as you can, as long in life as you can. And when you can move, that means life. And when you stop moving, that's certainly ushering and escorting us towards death. So, little kind of summing up on exercise. Exercise can be inflammatory. And I really want us to catch that. It really can. Some people can exercise too hard. Exercise is inflammatory because, as I stated earlier, if you're trying to build a muscle, you're doing what to it? You're tearing it down. And that's an intentional action we take. So understanding our injury risk through genetics kind of tells us how to personalize our exercise as well as our appropriate nutrition post-exercise, the amount of time we spend exercising, the rest period, etc. Everybody knows people that seem to have the propensity to sprain their ankle going up a stair. But everybody knows people that seem to have no issues at all with soft tissue injury. Why is that? Some people genetically just do not produce enough collagen to have healthy tendons and ligaments. Just the way it is. And in those people, you got to really put a load on after it. Right nutrition yields right action. Incorrect or wrong nutrition yields inaction. Think about what I just said. We need to have the proper amount of all of it. Exercise, rest, and right nutrition.
So a little test for you. Fitness is what percentage nutrition? 80%. You're listening.
Thank you for listening. That's awesome.
85% of your long-term outcome in terms of chronic disease is nutrition. Those fork curls, the most important medical decision you make is at the end of your fork.
Now, wait a minute. You need to say that one more time because that needs to be Facebooked, Instagram, and tweeted everywhere. Say that one more time.
Fork curls. The most important medical decision that you make every day, and oftentimes multiple times a day, is at the end of your fork.
That's Dr. Michelle Neal, March 13, 2018, Functional Medical Institute. Quote her.
So wouldn't it be awesome to have an optimal nutritional type or style that's right specifically for you? I mean, we all know that diets don't work, right? What's the first three letters of the word diet? D-I-E. Is there any wonder that when you go on a diet in about 3 weeks, you're like off the diet because you feel like you're going to die? Right? So optimal nutrition, the nutrition plan that is specific for you in terms of, carbohydrates and fats or lipids. A lot of us know that we shouldn't eat too much sugar, right? It causes problems. But data to see it in hard fact, sometimes on a sheet in front of you, keeps us away from the cookie jar. Keeps us away from, the fried chicken. Keeps us away from putting those things that go into our body and cause chronic inflammation, sickness, and disease. With genetics, we are actually able to see about the body's detoxification ability. The first method of detoxification is just don't put it in. If you don't put it in, the body doesn't have to eliminate it and take it out. But some systems have a limited ability to detoxify. They're either missing a gene, there's a part of a gene or a deletion that's not there, so we have to make it up with certain nutrients to make the pathway go so that we can actually process and eliminate certain things. It's awesome to be able to know our body's detoxification ability. And we can find out our body's antioxidant requirements. Remember, we talked about just piling antioxidants on board isn't necessarily the right thing to do because we can become toxic or overwhelmed with too many antioxidants. But individuals who are deficient in antioxidants need the right antioxidants in the right amounts. So what about personal vitamin and micronutrient needs? We can begin to understand a personalized micronutrient and supplement plan or need for you. If you took everything that some of the commercials out there said that you should take, you would have a garage full of supplements, right?
Garage? You'd have a house
You'd
full.
have a house full of supplements. Some of you may actually have a cabinet full where I need this and I need that and I need this and I need that. We can begin to define and refine the things that you actually need to always supplement with, and then start to chop away the excess and the things that we don't need, or we try to lean more towards getting things from food. Some of us have salt sensitivities. It drives blood pressure. We really need to keep the iodized salt out. Others of us, believe it or not, have alcohol sensitivities. We don't have the enzymes that we need to actually break that down. Like one person can handle 1 glass of wine or liquor and the other one can handle 4 or 5 bottles. Doesn't mean it's good for them, but that detoxification process is different in one person versus another. We can also find out about caffeine sensitivities. One person may drink a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock and they're awake till 4 o'clock the next day, whereas the other person might drink a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock and go to sleep by 6 o'clock that night. Different capacities to utilize different substances. And what about lactose intolerance? Believe it or not, that the majority of us are lactose intolerant, and the reason is that when we wean from the breast as babies, that gene turns off. So we have been cultured and raised drinking milk and consuming milk products, and oftentimes our systems are either intolerant to it or we don't have the enzymes to actually utilize it. So we're inflamed and we're gaining weight because we're putting an inflammagen in our system. Even though it might be minute, it's an ingredient in a boxed or packaged product, but it's still going in there in an amount every single day. And the body sees it as an inflammagen and it reacts against it. And the side effect may be resistant weight loss. So nutrigenomics, what is nutrigenomics? Nutrition plus your genetics is nutrigenomics. It's the study of the effects of our individual genetic variation in response to our nutrition and to our exercise. So genetics is the blueprint. What we put on them is how the genes express themselves. So just because you're born with a certain set of genes does not mean that they have to express themselves in a certain way. So if you have genes that say you're sugar sensitive, to make it simple, and you put a lot of sugar on those genes, guess what's going to happen at an early age? Diabetes. If you know that information and we know the problem is sugar, guess what doesn't have to happen? Diabetes. So just because you have a certain blueprint does not mean that the outcome has to happen if we know how to take care of the precious data that we've been given. So we know how important that these factors are and how these genes are expressed. We now know that we can turn them on and turn them off just by how we treat ourselves, how we eat, how we exercise, how we live. So the power is in you to turn yourself into a genetic powerhouse or not.
Genetic powerhouse, that's a good term we haven't used before. How many want to be genetic powerhouses? I think that's a good deal. So when we talk about allergies and sensitivities, I want to make sure that we understand they're two different things. There are very few people that are born with allergies. But sensitivities are often mistaken for allergies, and sensitivities are generally derived from, as Dr. Michele was saying, genetically, some people just simply do not tolerate refined carbohydrates at all. And the body goes, hey, get that stuff out of here. I don't like it. Has anybody been around a highly sensitive person before? Where no matter what you said, they either got mad or they cried. Like, would you chill out? Just relax, man. All right, do you need some GABA to chill out? Some of you knew what GABA was, some of you didn't. But the bottom line is, we're not born with a lot of these allergies. We are not born with a lot of sensitivities. They get created. And they get created many times because we really are doing the wrong things that our body's not meant to consume. A lot of the things we consume these days in the standard American diet is not food at all. Does everyone realize that? It's just a bunch of chemicals, genetically modified organisms that are not even fit for human consumption. My goodness, we wouldn't feed those to our dogs. How many think that pizza and ice cream are good for you? Okay, we go, wow, but that's what I love. And I would say to you, if you have an animal, feed those to your animal every time you eat them. You're going to watch your animal die. It's going to break your heart. So if it's not fit for, a little spot to eat it, don't feed it to yourself or your grandkids, for Pete's sake. Treat people as good as we treat animals. Makes you think, doesn't it? We go to the zoo and those signs out there say, guess what? Don't feed the animals human food. And we don't, because it's gonna hurt those poor animals, the poor babies. We don't want to make the baboon at the zoo die. He's too funny to watch climb up the tree and fall down again. But yet, we do it every single day without thinking about it. Genetics tell us a story. It's time we begin to listen to the way we're created. Okay? Now, as Dr. Michele was saying, she mentioned lactose intolerance. That's just one of the things we look at, but this is just a simple example. If people take in a lot of lactose, that sugar from milk and dairy, and they're going to have responsiveness to it, over the time that inflammatory response or that inflammatory sensitivity, it's just not going to be isolated to lactose anymore, because the body's going to upregulate its immune system all the time to deal with that. And when it does, guess what? Before too long, you're going to have problems with other things. So I like to start at the beginning, and that's why we use this as an example, because everyone's heard of it. And we're not going into 51 pages of data tonight, but when you understand what foods your body really, really wants, certainly it unwinds a lot of confusion, right?
So what about carbohydrate sensitivity? It helps us understand how our bodies utilize sugar. And this can actually start to reduce the likelihood of gaining, unnecessary weight, or even gut issues, or reducing type 2 diabetes, which is on the rise in our nation. Doesn't it make sense that if the genes tell us that we're carbohydrate sensitive or that we have insulin sensitivity issues, that we should get sugar under control? If that is the cause of sugar diabetes, shouldn't we take the cause out? Shouldn't we get to the root of the problem? So why do we use a Band-Aid if we know what's at the root of the problem? Understanding genes will tell us if we have that root, and then we can get rid of the problem or avoid a future problem. When we get sugar under control, did you know that sugar or type 2 diabetes or diabetes, sugar is like the #1 inflammagen? And inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease. Everybody say all. Inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease. So sugars, when you put sugar in your system, it makes all your proteins sticky. That's why most diabetics are some of the most unhealthy people there are. It creates cardiovascular disease. We start chopping off their limbs, a toe at a time, then an ankle, then a lower limb, and then before we know it, they've lost a leg, and then they're on dialysis, and they've lost their eyes, etc. and otherwise. That's all sugar. That's cardiovascular disease. So we can stomp out and decrease the risk for cardiovascular disease. And once we take sugar out, did you know that when your body gets rid of excess sugars, that you stop having cravings? You start to put your body in a fat-burning state. It just naturally starts to burn fat as fuel. So all those sugar cravings is sugar begets sugar. It's like being on a vicious cookie cycle. When you eat a cookie in 30 minutes, because of insulin, the hormone that manages sugar, guess what you're going to want again? Sugar. Because your blood sugar is low, insulin is taking that sugar out. So you're chronically on this craving cycle due to eating habits. So getting on a good precision genetic protocol begins to help your body become less inflamed, managing chronic sickness and disease, and putting you on the train for long-term health and wellness.
Love that long-term health and wellness. So, quick story, a person comes in here in our lobby, and she's actually here tonight, walks in from her diabetic education class, and she said, I need some help. And we told her that we could help her. And so she did everything we asked her to, including this particular genetic test here. She put it into practice. And I think she probably was down 60 or 70 pounds, and this is just a few months. She's off all, everybody say all again, all of that type 2 diabetes medication junk. Pretty cool story, huh? And she can tell you who she is in a little bit if she chooses to. Didn't want to light her up too much, but it's always good to see her because she's lost a whole person off of herself. And she, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Let's give her a great big hand right over there, Terry Brown. She did a good job. Everybody's unique in how they burn fat. So when you unwind that, you can really take excess fat off of the system. Case in point, by specific dietary plans, the Paleolithic diet and the ketogenic diet are misunderstood. People are always looking for the magical formula. Those work for some people if constructed properly, but they don't work for the same amount of people, even if constructed properly. Some people cannot tolerate high levels of saturated fat. It's all dependent upon the genes and their current biomarker situation. If you have somebody with atherosclerotic activity or plaque activity going, do you think I want to put a lot of excess fat on them? No, because it's going to drive the lipids even temporarily, and it could cause their life to end abruptly with a stroke or heart attack. So we've got to be very, very careful with that. Understand that one size does not fit all. Remember, 99.9% alike, but 0.1% difference. That 0.1% can be a matter of success and optimization of health, even compared to even death and a drastic mistake. Now, in today's world of these ketogenic diet plans, and I'm not going to pick on that because we typically practice that more or less myself and Dr. Michele, but many don't understand this, and they fall into the trap of thinking that ketogenic plans are just a bunch of protein, as much as you can eat and as much fat as you can possibly cram in your mouth, because more is always better. It's kind of how we view it in America, don't we? More is always better. But we've got to be very careful with that because it's a trap. Sometimes elevated triglycerides or elevated lipids can be a trigger that sends us over the edge and starts us in that number one killer process called heart disease. And that's something we all need to avoid, because we believe it's certainly avoidable for the most part, just like type 2 diabetes, if we live our life correctly with proper nutrition, proper exercise, proper rest, and proper stress management. Okay?
So your body is detoxifying every single minute, every single hour of every single day. And detoxification is determined by your genetics. Your body's internal organs, like your liver and your kidneys, have phases of detoxification that they go through that require enzymes. And sometimes those enzymes, those proteins, those things can be missing. And the organs of detoxification, if they don't have these enzymes, they can't perform at a high function. So things kind of hang around, the body gets bogged down, and a sluggish metabolism ensues, and we feel slow, we feel foggy-headed, we can't lose weight, in spite of all our clean eating efforts, and sometimes even in spite of exercise, because sometimes if we're exercising too much, that can become inflammatory and slow things down. So if we cannot properly detoxify, we can suffer DNA damage, your body's ability to regenerate and repair. And eventually, if we lose the ability to regenerate and repair, what kind of cells do those cells become? Cancer-type cells. And we become polluted, if you will. So can you see why understanding how to fix detoxification issues, if it's as simple as adding certain antioxidants or completing a step in a process of that detoxification pathway, can actually help you? So if there's an allele, remember those SNPs that we talked about, those letters, that alphabet soup? If there is one that is altered, you may be more susceptible to a toxic effect from certain compounds. For example, just grilled meats, those polycyclic hydrocarbons or heterocyclic amines that come from grilling meat, some people cannot detoxify or eliminate them because the phases of metabolism are not working properly.
Will you say that one more time?
Polycyclic heterocarbons and heterocyclic amines.
I love it when she talks sexy like that.
So your internal organs, they have phases, phase 1 and phase 2, that actually detoxify and eliminate and neutralize the toxins. And if it's not happening, those things can kind of build up and become free radicals in your system and cause cancer and bog your system down. So some individuals do not have the capacity to perform those functions. What may help and what does help is certain allium vegetables like garlic, shallots. What are some other? Onions.
Just don't eat them around your loved ones.
Yep. And right.
Unless you both eat them, then it's okay. You can cry together and kiss together and you'll still smell bad and it'll be very emotional. Sorry.
Just making sure you're listening.
Yeah.
So, the good news is we can fill in a lot of the gaps if we know what the gaps are by allium vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. These things have certain components in them that help those detoxification pathways.
Now, we won't stress this too much, but we mentioned it earlier a lot, antioxidants. I use that as an example, and sometimes you can do too much. You got to do the right types. Some antioxidants we take will slow other gene processes down. Our bodies are not designed to be sort of monofunctional. They do a lot of things. Everything works together. Our bodies are a system. If one system messes up or one system is not working, isn't it reasonable to assume the way we work together as a body that some other system might get out of balance as well as the body tries to compensate? So it's important to know, exactly how many antioxidants to take. It depends on your activity level too. Because remember, if you're not sleeping and your stress levels are way up and you are exercising a lot, are you going to create more free radicals than if you are sleeping, are getting the right exercise, and are eating correctly? Of course. So the varying targets of the amount and types of antioxidants are very important to understand.
So omega-3s and inflammation. Sugar creates inflammation. Also, the wrong kinds of oils in your engine can create inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids are necessary for cellular health. They make up part of the outer membrane of every cell in your body. And genetic testing can indicate if you carry the SNPs or the alphabet components that indicate a tendency towards more inflammation. So those with a higher tendency towards more inflammation are going to need to increase their omega-3 fatty acids. They're going to need more omega-3s to combat that natural inclination to be inflamed. In the standard American diet, the ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s is 20 to 1. And guess what it should be? 3 to 1. Guess what's in our cell membranes? Omega-6s. Guess how our cells are? Inflamed. So we need to take in more foods that contain omega-3 fatty acids like salmon, mackerel, herring, even tuna. Or vegetarians, you've got the chia, the flax, and the hemp seeds that also have omega-9s in them as well. And then the proper omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is absolutely critical. In fact, every single individual that I have ever checked in the clinic, looked at their omega index, their omega-3 to 6 ratio is off unless they are supplementing or on a very healthy nutritional plan far away from the standard American diet. So the omega-6 index, or the omega-3 index, that omega index, is a great marker of cellular inflammation. So if you've never had an omega index done, it really should be a vital sign. It's right up there with blood pressure, cellular health. How healthy are your cells? Do you need more omega-3 fatty acid support? Guess what your brain is made up of? Fatty acids. If you go on a low-fat, no-fat diet, what are you starving? Your brain. So remember, inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease, and omega-3s by their very nature are anti-inflammatory. They're like changing oil in the engine of your car. We've got to kind of squelch out that omega-6 ratio so that our cells are healthy.
So the next time somebody calls you fathead, just simply say thank you. Thank you for having great faith in me. Thank you for complimenting me for my intelligence. So much is at the forefront of understanding about methylation. How many have heard that term before? You go on these forums, it's everywhere out there. It's simply not a matter of giving B vitamins. There are multiple SNPs, including MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. There's MTR, MTRR, COMT. They all have functionality. So when you start going through all these genes, it's not as simple as picking one out and saying, I have a disease called MTHFR. We've seen that so many times. Sometimes B vitamins are the answer. Sometimes if we give too many B vitamins, the symptoms can get worse because in the methylation pathway, and we could probably do a whole class on this at some point, we're talking about DNA repair. We're talking about energy production. We're talking about hormone metabolism, neurotransmitter metabolism. We're talking about detoxification. Methylation is an incredibly important area in our bodies. It forms life. It's like the director, the conductor for DNA. It tells DNA when to speed up, when to slow down, when it's making things. It's a big area. So just giving B vitamins just ad nauseum is not the answer. We need to know how much, what type, etc. to give. Everybody's DNA here is different. This is why this area is so critical. There's a giant body of research out here at this moment in time in this area. We could probably spend more than an hour, as I said, on this sometime in the future. But suffice it to say, this area has got to be navigated very, very carefully and diligently, because mistakes can be made. But it can also be the greatest area, because we've seen people come in here that are so wired up with anxiety because of dysfunctional methylation areas, and we're able to give them the right nutritional protocol, the right exercise, the right vitamins and or minerals, and guess what happens? They don't need SSRIs anymore, which is a pretty cool process. That's antidepressants, if you're wondering.
So what about vitamin D and calcium? Bone health, genes can tell us about bone health. You know, variations in certain genes may tell us about cellular receptors. If you have a defective vitamin D receptor, maybe we need to up the vitamin D. That may aid in preventing osteoporosis at some point down the road. Did you know that vitamin D is not just a vitamin, it's a hormone? It also works on the brain. When the sun goes behind the clouds in the wintertime, what happens? We all get depressed. Vitamin D is like an antidepressant. You get seasonal affective disorder. Vitamin D, it's at the top of the food chain as far as being a hormone affecting the brain, being important in bone health. It's not the answer to just take more. We really need to know about receptor function and lab value.
So we know that salt sensitivity is associated with high blood pressure, hypertension. Now, we're not talking about any salt. We're talking about the iodized refined salt that's typically on everybody's processed food in massive, gargantuan amounts. Bleached white salt. Sometimes the people use just general Himalayan or Celtic sea salt. Everything is just fine. But the bottom line is some people are more sensitive than others. If people have a high propensity for high blood pressure and you give them a lot of salt, are they going to get high blood pressure? Likely so. Some people can take it in and metabolize it just a little bit better. The bottom line is, it is nice to know, because hypertension or high tension on our bodies is certainly a risk factor for heart disease, and it's something that can be avoided with lifestyle. We've talked a lot about avoidance tonight. How many think avoidance is the best policy? Or even reversal if we have it. So
our DNA information is really critical. How many know that you are the CEO of your own healthcare? Mm-hmm. You are the CEO of your own future outcome. You are the CEO of knowing or being ownership of the only skin bag that you live in, and you're sitting in it. How are you going to manage it? We need to stop converting symptoms into disease and just start stepping up and taking charge of it and going, I'm going to manage my genetic makeup. I'm going to keep track of my scorecard. I'm going to keep things optimal, down the optimal pathway. So DNA is rapidly developing as a science, and it will most definitely become the key to precision medicine in the healthier population as we take charge of our health and we step forward embracing this knowledge and putting it into our life so that we can actually have the highest quality of life.